Hello, welcome back. As you can see, I've positioned all of the items together roughly on the sort of terrain setup that I'm going to be using on the day. The only difference really will be that I'll bring it a little bit forward and try and think about this sort of coloration that I've got here, because it's sort of a bit stark. As I said, this stems from it being a 28mm sort of gaming cloth used primarily with bolt action in mind. But as you can see, from a sort of casual scan around, it's not looking too bad. There's a few areas that I want to have a quick think about, in no particular order really. I've got a little bit of gapping here, which I need to think about what I want to do with that. I'll probably fill that and try and paint that in a little bit. I've got a little bit of gapping here, some of which I've done over here as well, and I'll probably do the same sort of thing, which is to put a little bit of filler in, build it up a bit, try and go careful that I don't touch the side of the tower, and then paint, then sort of glue and sand and paint as the rest of the piece. The big difference for me though is that I've got, just find something to point with, that section over there where I've got a noticeable colour difference between the two wall sections. That's entirely my fault, caused by undercoating one of the pieces of foam board with a light grey, and then it comes out much darker on the actual finished item. So what I'm going to do there is to use a thin black wash on the right hand side pieces and just get it to be tonally the same as the left hand side, and I'll probably ease off as I go towards this tower so that I don't have to think too much about doing that as well. Similarly with that tower piece over there, I'll do the same. So as I say, in no particular order, get that tonal item sorted out, fill in some of the gaps. But in general terms, for a low cost model, I'm already quite pleased with how this is looking. And certainly functionally for our game, this is about supporting the game process rather than being a piece in, a display item, for want of a better phrase. And as you can see, if I move that apart, we've got this convenience of actually dismantling the sections and hiding them away. And that's for me the most important thing, is storage, practicality, reusability. There's a few areas that I would probably improve on a more formal model, as it were, but I'm quite pleased with the way that the stones turned out. And really, when I think about the whole gaming sort of table now, we come out, this area, I've got the hill over there on the left hand side, which is going to form part of the game sort of scenario options. What I'm going to do now is try and break up this surface a bit. So I've got these rough MDF pieces which I purchased a few years ago, I think from just an eBay sale, and I ended up with loads of them. So what I'm going to do is use a tree kit and try and put some material on these, scatter them about on the board, and basically just try and deaden the effect of this stark contrast. Now bear in mind, when I bring the board forward, a lot of this will sort of disappear, because in reality for a gaming sort of table it's going to sit more like this. But I do want to think about breaking up, as I say, some of this lighter portion here, and maybe I've got another hill over here, excuse the light's going to be in the way, that needs a bit more work on it because it's a little bit too regular in terms of the stepping. But I think if I can get this sorted out, bring the model forward for the game, and then really concentrate on blending in with this darker tone, you'll see as well here, just a bit of a tip, as I've gone round trimming off the felt that I've put on the bottom, you can see that there, oops. Yeah, you can see the felt that I've put on there, which really does help, because you can put a layer of PVA on the bottom of the model. But if I go back down here, this comes out because I've gone around with a very sharp scalpel. Just be warned, the felt is very durable, and if you don't have a really sharp blade, you're better off using scissors. But what I'm going to do is put some dark, probably some burnt umber, just to tonally blend that in. as I said, it's really all about making this work for the game now. And then in the second sort of series, we'll show you, well, I'll show you what I'm doing in terms of painting, and hopefully some of my gaming colleagues are going to bring some numbers or add to the numbers, certainly in terms of the orcish force. But that's kind of where we are, I think, folks. So I'm going to work on these 3 pieces, do a bit more blending in. I'm still also very committed to this idea that I'm going to weather this finish a bit more. So my current thoughts are, have a look at what effects I achieve by putting a very dark wash, a very light but dark wash in terms of coloration on those castle walls. Maybe mix that in a little bit so that tonally the rest of the castle doesn't look quite such like a printed model. And then I'm looking at sort of greenery to simulate, perhaps moss, but more, ivy, etc., growing up these walls, and just giving a bit of age to it. But in terms of practical experience for the game, I think it's going to work really well. So I'll keep you updated with progress. Hi there, just a quick word on these tree kits, and there are several manufacturers. I happen to be using a Woodland Scenics version. What you get is a set of armatures. Now these armatures are bendable, and they come in a flat sort of position like this, with a stand usually. The stand might be a little bit aggressive or overly large for some people's tastes, but for mine, sort of practical purposes, it's great. All you do is literally position the tree as you feel fit, or as you see fit, sorry. And you want to try and get a lot of variety in your trees. Anyway, I'm not going to labour that too much. Once you're happy with the way that looks, what you then do is use a tacky glue, and I specify tacky because you want a glue that's designed to stay with some adhesive properties even after it, quotes, dries. So I've been using a Kraut tack glue, which I'll find shortly and show you. But all we want to do is glue this, and then you dip the tree once the glue is dried off a little bit, because you don't want it sort of dripping wet. You want it to be tacky, but not, as I say, straight out the tube. And then you just dip the whole tree into the bag, and effectively, occasionally I will press some bits on, but what you're trying to do is collect enough foliage on there that it looks more realistic. Now obviously you can go to town painting this thing if you want. I'm not going to bother, really, just because of speed. And then it will be placed on here. Now this board is going to be, well, because it's MDF, I'm going to put some MDF sealer on it, just to make sure that we keep warping to a minimum. Do the trees and effectively stick them on, and then we'll texture the base, or maybe I'll texture the base a little bit and then put the trees on, depending on how much coverage I want. The idea here is not so much on this particular occasion to allow units to pass through. It's more about providing, as I said, a bit of to break up the surface of the gaming table a little bit, really, but also try and keep a bit of consistency with the underlying table. So I'll find the glue, we'll do some work, and I'll show you what happens. So here we go. This is the glue that I've been using. There are, again, many other different choices to make, manufacturers to choose from. But really what you're looking for is a glue that's designed for scenics. Now, I was a little bit dubious about a glue that pretends or purports to stay tacky, because you think, well, is it going to dry then? But honestly, it does make quite a bit of difference in my experience, because what you're trying to do is use a glue that's going to keep its adhesive properties, and to be honest, all that does is really add to its durability. So I'm just going to clear a little bit of space. To be honest, I decided to save time, squidge a lot of glue out onto the top and use an old cocktail stick. And I'll sort of go over the top a little bit on this one so that you get the idea of what we're doing. Obviously, it's not a particularly time-consuming activity once you get yourself properly prepped, and my apologies for me not doing that in the first place. You want, obviously, some irregularity to it. You don't really want to put glue absolutely everywhere, although, to be honest, there's probably no harm in doing that, because the chances of the foliage sticking exactly all over the place where you want it to go is low. Right, okay. So now that it looks like a tree in winter, I'm sort of happy with that. So I'm going to leave that one to one. Oops, leave that one to one side. Put it off camera. Take one of the other ones, so that we've got a couple of different selections to look at. And I think the important thing to do here is to wait after you've done this. Because you need the glue to go tacky enough that it's going to do its job. So you've seen that. I'm going to stop the camera, do a few more of the trees, and then get myself ready to do the flocking. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is simply cut the bag. Give yourself a little bit of working space. You can obviously mix different colours, and you can go back and select more tree kits with different colours and mix them around and put different foliage in the bag, etc. I find it useful to to just mix this stuff up a little bit because it comes a bit sort of compacted. So we're nearly there, and this may be a little bit. I may be being a bit eager, but I'm going to take one of the ones that I started to glue with at the start, not that one, this one, and you just basically plunge into the bag. And what I tend to do is give it a bit of a squidge around. If I'm not happy with the result, I'll come back out again. Now that's looking like a completely foliaged up tree, if that makes sense. And what I want to do is just reassure you that lots of bits drop off. And what you want to do now, oh sorry, let's just make sure that camera actually can show you what I'm doing. There we go. What you want to do now is leave it. So you're going to use obviously more clumps to begin with, and you probably want to get yourself a table that you can sweep up the sort of surplus. But as I stress, where the tacky glue is will never fully dry. And I know that sounds a bit nuts, but that's really the principle of the glue, is that you've got some adhesive properties retained throughout the life of this tree. And we're going to put that to one side. And when I don't know, a few hours have passed, just give that a shake. Try and identify perhaps some little bits like this that are going to come off, and then assess what you're left with. I'm going to do a few of these trees that I've prepared over here. I'm probably going to wait for them to dry a little bit. I have to stress though, obviously where you put the glue is really important. So on this particular one, for example, I've tried to go to the outer parts of the branch, whereas some of these smaller ones I've gone for a more fuller coverage. And just simple things like that will help you get more variety on your sort of finished product, as it were, as well as obviously how you align the tree branches themselves. But we'll let that dry and have a little look at the little mini forest. Okay folks, thanks for joining me again. You can see that I've done a few bits and pieces to the castle. I've filled in the sections I said I was going to fill in. I've put a little bit of decoration on here, hopefully not gone overboard on that, and I've gone over the edges here, sorry, I said I would do to sort of tidy that up with a bit of burnt umber. However, you can probably see some fairly horrific weathering that I've done. Now in reality that doesn't actually look too bad. All that is a bit of strong tone, a little bit of black ink watered down. And it was one of those things that I started, and then the minute I did a section, I thought, you've got to keep going here. I am going to go back round some of the worst offending areas, like here, and just pick out a few light bits in it to make it give me that sort of brick look again. So, believe me, it won't look quite as horrible as it may appear, and it doesn't actually look that bad to the naked eye. It's just really getting magnified by the camera. The only thing I'm going to do at the back here is I've started to create a sort of template for a door to go there, and what effectively is a drawbridge, because I left a gap here, which was deliberate, to try and get, you know, the feeling that this was the last sort of refuge or the last sort of fortress. Down this side, I'll just move the camera down here a bit. There's a bit of a gap here. So what I'm actually going to do is I got hold of some stones just to give me some reference points for this sort of stone effect I've created. And I'm going to stick one there just to really, well, stop you seeing the end of this sort of circular bit where I've recessed the turret, but also just to sort of tie it in a little bit tonally. The idea is that this is obviously blocked off anyway, and therefore enemy troops can't come around here. So the other thing I've been doing, we scan around a bit, is gluing the rest of these tree bases, model trees. I'm just going to readjust the lighting a bit. And as you can see, they've not come out too bad. This was that set that I did originally. I then had a bit of a mad moment where I decided to mix some different flock in the same bag, thinking that would help. And to be honest, I wouldn't do that again. So if we just sort of scan around here, we've developed quite a decent portion of forestry now. And what I was just going to show you was, this is those irregular bases that I mentioned earlier. Just have a quick look. Like this. So this is now, this side has been sealed with MDF sealer, and then I've just glued it to a piece of felt with some PVA. Then I'm going to cut round it. So as you can see, that's very flat. So I've cut round that. Then the next job is to take the trees and effectively glue them to the base. And what I'll do first is take them out of these sort of locator things. I mean, these aren't the world's prettiest looking things, but to be honest, once you've painted around them, put some sand, etc., it's going to be fine. So all I'm going to do really is get a sensible mix of trees on this base. Once I've cut out the felt, glue the bases down, glue this in probably with super glue. If you want to, you can leave them obviously detachable. That might help for storage, but to me that's not a particularly primary or major concern. So I'm going to do those, try and tone down some of the disaster that I've created on the wearing or the aging of the wall, and give you guys a shout. So we're pretty much done. As you can see, I've finished the woodland areas. It looks a little bit stark on this lighter background, but of course it won't be on that when the actual game gets shunted forward a little bit. The castle sort of aging process, I've sort of tidied up a little bit, and all I've done is create a small number of brick-like outlines on the darker bits that I'd kind of messed up the first time around. I've also get a pointer. I've also put a door on the rear sort of main keep area there. Again, a little bit cartoonish, but actually to the naked eye, as part of the overall setup, I think that's going to work fine. I might tone down the door a little bit to be more in keeping with the door that I made for the front. And these are just, well, the one at the back here is just simple card. The one at the front is foam board. But generally speaking, I'm quite pleased with that as a gaming piece. The camera has a tendency to pick up a lot of the sort of streaking and discoloration that I put on the walls. But in reality, as I said, I'm quite pleased with it as a gaming piece. So that's certainly good enough for now. I've put a few 10mm figures at the back there just to give you an indication of scale. And over on the other side here, I've got that hilt piece finished. I've put a little bit of blocking on the surface of it, really just to help sort of blend it in a bit. And I might increase the density of the woodland areas, just because I want that to be to the sort of rear of the Orcish army, and where they effectively emerge from to attack the castle. I've also realised that in the Warmaster book there is a separate mission which is around just having a single castle keep. So my plan is over there, that third section, to fit a sort of plug-in module in place of the door, in place of the wall, so that can serve as a centerpiece for that kind of game as well. So really the next stage is to get the armies painted, and that will be a separate little set of videos, and I'll show you what I've been doing. Anyway, thanks very much for your time, and I hope you found it interesting.